Dear friends, we gather here today to discuss the merits of the Cradle series. And by discussing the merits of the Cradle series, we discuss and we defend non-epic fantasy. I have found myself a little overwhelmed with the 1,000+ page, massive scope, insane world building, sprawling narrative, 10 character deep fantasy novels that seem to be dominating the genre. Now, of course, these have their place. I still very much enjoy these types of books, but at a certain point, you become a little bit bogged down. Or should I say, I become a little bit bogged down. I don't want to speak for you, but after going through 4 or 5 series like this, Wheel of Time, Malazan, Wind and Truth, finishing off the first half of the Stormlight Archive, I needed something that was a little bit less dense. Now, in that pursuit, something that was very important to me was not sacrificing narrative quality, writing. You know, I didn't just want to read fluff pieces. I didn't just want to read random fantasy novels or romantasy, God forbid. So I was in search of something that I think would scratch the fantasy itch without me having to invest my heart and soul into it. And I found the Cradle series. I found the Cradle series sometime last year as I was just coming off of reading, I think I was finishing up Wheel of Time, or maybe I was finishing a reread of the Mistborn saga, I don't remember. Regardless, Audible recommended it to me. I tried the first book. I said, you know what? That was pretty good. I'm gonna keep going with this series. And we need to understand, first and foremost, that this series is not going to be epic, quote unquote. So as I talk about this series, and as I recommend this series to you, if you are looking for the sprawling narratives that I described earlier, this book series is probably not for you. It is not in the same vein as the Lord of the Rings or Wheel of Time. It is more so its own thing. It more so borrows from anime style narratives. It more so borrows from, you know, seasons of different anime. So if you're coming to this video looking for an epic fantasy series, I must warn you away from Cradle. I still think that you should give it a shot, but you'll know pretty soon after the first book if it's something that you want to continue. So with all the caveats out of the way that I feel that I must do at the beginning of any of these videos to stave off the inane comments that I'm sure to get, we can begin to discuss the Cradle series by Will Wight and what it meant to me, what I think its high points are, what its low points are, give a general recommendation, and just, you know, sit down and chat for a couple minutes about non-epic fantasy and how I think it is a valuable part of the fantasy genre. Cradle falls firmly in the progression narrative style. I didn't really understand what this was, but when it was described to me as Dragon Ball Z, that made a lot more sense. Basically, when we start with Goku, he's this level of power, and as the series goes on, Dragon Ball Z, he gets stronger and stronger and stronger in order to defeat a new foe. Now we take that structure of Dragon Ball Z, of Hunter x Hunter, of shonen anime, progression anime, and we put that in more of a fantasy setting, we make it a novel, and we have the Cradle series. This is at its base, at its core, what this series is about, and I think that that spoke to me as a lover of Dragon Ball Z, as someone who engaged with Dragon Ball Z from a very young age, someone who engaged with shonen anime from a very young age. The progression style is not as played out for me. I know a lot of people find it a little bit dull and a little bit boring and a little bit predictable. And the series at times is all of those things for people who do not really like progression anime or progression narratives in general. But for me, what speaks to me also speaks to the reason why I'm a powerlifter and why I continually try to get stronger. This pursuit of being better, this pursuit of being stronger in whatever area. And in this case, in the Cradle series, that is the forms of power that take place throughout the entire world. We learn from a very early age, when we start with our main protagonist in the first book, that there are a set number of forms of power. And as we go, that scope expands. And of course, our main protagonist wants to continue climbing the ladder of those forms of power. And that's something that, as a driving force throughout the narrative, worked for me. I know that some people may say, oh, well, after the 4th book or whatever, I'm tired of him continually climbing the ladder. But for me, I was excited to see how our protagonist, Lyndon, continued to battle different enemies, different challenges, how he continued to improve his martial arts, his control of the forms of power and the forms of fighting that are within this world. That was something that I really enjoyed. In its mirroring of these shonen progression animes, I found comfort. And I think that that's why I enjoyed these books so much. I had gone away from, rewatching some of those animes to try and get deeper, trying to find more depth in reading and in film and in any media that I consumed. And I think I just burnt myself out to the point where I just needed something that reminded me of home, something that reminded me of the original touch points of media that I first fell in love with when I was like 7. And maybe that's inner child, or maybe that's because I had a child and you start to reflect on yourself and your relationship with media. I don't know. Maybe it's just that I wanted something fun to do while I was doing my cardio. And these books were easy enough to follow along without me needing to, write down family trees and lineages and names and some things that some modern fantasy books require of you. Instead, I could throw these in, get on the treadmill, walk for 45 minutes, and enjoy my time. All of this is not to say that the writing is subpar. I would say that the writing is a solid B. It is along the lines of most modern fantasy that we see. We're not talking about the poetry and prose of Tolkien here. That is hard to do in any way, shape, or form. And we're not talking about the grandeur of Game of Thrones, Song of Ice and Fire. We're not talking about the grandeur of The Wheel of Time. In those comparisons, I don't want you to believe that this is airplane paperbacks that you're just picking up and reading. There is still solid quality character work. There is solid quality plot. Everything seems very tight. Everything seems very planned out. I think as you read these books, you start to trust the author, Will Wight, to take you where he wants you to go. And he always seems to have a plan. He always seems to have a way out of things. Now that does get a little bit repetitive and it does get a little bit predictable. But like I said, if you enjoy the through line of the progression narrative, that can kind of carry you. There are moments towards the back half of the series after the tournament arc that start to feel a little bit repetitive and start to feel like we're just trying to get to the end. But I would say that those are few and far between the moments of triumph of Lyndon and his party overcoming a hurdle, overcoming a barrier, defeating a new foe. So there's payoff, and the payoff is just oftentimes so worth it that you kind of forget those moments of, well, we did this in book 7. Why are we redoing this in book 9? It kind of flows really well. Where I think in the hands of someone who is maybe a little bit less versed in the genre or a little bit less experienced as an author, maybe it would start to feel so boring and so repetitive that you'd want to put it down. That didn't happen for me personally. If it did for you, let me know. There were moments after the first and second book, I think, where I was really deciding if I wanted to fully delve in. I'm the type of person that really doesn't give up on things. Much to my detriment, I will read a book to its end. I don't think I've ever stopped reading a book or watching a TV show for that matter, or an anime, and I've gotten caught in some really, really bad quality dips, especially with anime as you're watching it. There are moments in between seasons, maybe it changed production houses, maybe it changed directors, and the quality has noticeably dipped, but I just can't make myself stop. I never really felt a moment like that, where after the second book, I will say, I just kind of surrendered to the author and let them take me where they wanted to go, follow along, enjoy, but not try and put so much of my own spin into it. I really allowed this narrative to just kind of carry me, which I think is a good way to approach these types of books. There is some slight philosophical depth, there is some progression that maybe you can gain insight from, but overall, these are books that I think are for entertainment, and we have kind of lost our way. Again, I'm speaking for you, but maybe I should just speak for myself here. I had kind of lost my way in my reading journey, trying to find so much meaning and not really reading for entertainment, and getting completely burned out because I was looking to these great texts for meaning in my own life, when in actuality, sometimes reading a book can be the purest form of entertainment. Those are some of my haphazard thoughts. As I have just finished the Cradle series, I enjoyed my time, and I wanted to discuss it because I think that it holds a solid place in the fantasy genre that I hope that we are not losing. As fantasy kind of diverges into what I see as these epic fantasy narratives or these surface level romantasy type plots, I feel that we're losing a little bit in the middle of what I deem as non-epic fantasy that still has a lot of value. And I think Cradle sits right in the middle of that dichotomy and is valuable and is entertaining and is something that I think a lot of people should engage with. So I haven't seen a ton of people talk about these books. I really enjoyed my time. I think overall it's a 3.5 out of 5 across the series. Some books are better than others. For me, like I said, I think the high point is the tournament arc. I think that's around book 8, but there's dungeon crawling aspects, there's tournament aspects, there's, grand existential dread towards the end of the narrative. There's a lot of things for a lot of people, but again, the spine is the progression. The spine is, you remember when Goku turned Super Saiyan 1 and your life changed because you watched as he had to defeat Frieza and he tapped into something deep inside of himself and became a Super Saiyan. That core is what drives these books forward. And it truly was an incredibly entertaining time for me to engage with these books. So if I've piqued your interest, I recommend that you go check them out. I will give a special shout out to the Audible versions of these because Travis Baldree, the narrator, one of the better narrators that I have come across. I listen to a lot of fantasy books. Sometimes they can be incredibly bland, but Travis does an incredible job with all the voices, does an incredible job with the tone. I just really, really enjoyed my time having him read these books to me. So if you're an audiobook person in any way, go for these. I think that you will really, really enjoy them. Thank you so much for watching 15 minutes of my ramblings on this series. I just couldn't get it out of my head and I wanted to talk about it. So hopefully I've piqued your interest and you give them a shot. If you have read these books, let me know what you thought in the comments. If your opinions diverge from mine, I would love to hear about it. That is what this channel is about. How do the books we read speak to us as individuals? Please let me know in the comments. That would be really cool. We're reading 100 books this year, so you should subscribe to the channel to follow along with that journey. I appreciate you very much. I hope you're reading something very good at the current moment. I will talk to you in the next video.